We're all people who are working right now in Somalia and South Sudan, working on community healing programs that are using trauma as a community lens to actually work on some of the peace building agenda. In the past, I talk about Osman and I were off doing this as peace building practitioners, but using trauma. And in many ways, the trauma kind of lens and the trauma focus. And what we realized is we were winging a lot of things that we didn't really need to wing, and that there were professionals who were actually willing to partner with us and actually make our work much more grounded and focused and actually more meaningful in the way that we are working with our communities. So we started to work with Ilya Yacevich from the Global Trauma Project, and using the trauma-informed community empowerment framework that she's going to talk shortly to you about. And then Boyle, who is a South Sudanese, even though you can't see that, and the holistic trauma healing program that he's been working with. And Paul is actually going to go back a little bit and talk to you a little bit about the big topic that you were talking about in the last panel, about now working with leadership. Because Paul has actually been working with the generals of South Sudan and doing very clear trauma healing with them, to the point that they're now asking him to come back and do a meeting with the Minister of Defense, correct? Yeah. And then also he's going to talk a little bit about some programs that we've been talking about with IGAD as the platform and the organizing body to be able to continue to work with the key leadership at the political level. And again, he'll talk to you about what are people's feelings at those levels when they're addressing issues around trauma. And it may actually surprise you how open they are to actually being able to deal with, to be able to be frank with those discussions. So he'll tell us more about that. Then Angelo Ingi is the executive director of, I call it a social movement, I don't know quite what it is, called Morning Star. It's a national healing program for South Sudan. It's in its infancy stage, it's very new, but they've started to put together a wide range of programs and materials in at least 10 South Sudanese languages. So they're taking it into the language issue and making this a part of what people what people can actually understand in their own languages, and making this a national program and trying to make the links. And he's going to tell us a bit more about that. And then Osman is from Mogadishu, and he's going to tell you about the Koranabada program, which is actually very similar to the Morning Star. When we started the Morning Star last September in Juba, we invited several of our practitioners from Somalia to talk to them about the work that they've been undertaking for the last 5 or 6 years in this field and to learn from them. We hope in the future that this international learning or this contextual learning will continue to grow between South Sudan and Somalia. Osman has been doing this work now for the last 8 years. And we've actually started to really do a lot of pilots, and we've started to try to gather some evidence-based results. It's really, really simple right now. It's very small. It's what the donors are pushing us to do, and what they're starting to say, hey, you can actually do this. And he's going to just share a little bit about that. We know that there are researchers in the room, so be gentle with us. We were a small little group with a small budget, and we've really tried to do the best that we could do with getting data and starting to do it. But it's a start, and we hope to now start to build off of that. So this is the group. Ilya is going to start. I'm going to give you 8 minutes, Ilya.
Wow, this has been a great day so far. And I have to say, I've been a little bit emotional today, being here in this room, feeling like it's in these last several years that I haven't had a huge amount of opportunity to be in a room with this number of people who are doing really similar work and are very passionate and competent in the field and in the work that's going on. So it's an honor to have us here and to meet with all of you. Like Angie said, I think our relationship kind of with myself and Global Trauma Project with this team came about, I don't know, a couple years ago. I guess it started when Angie and I met, and she had talked a lot about the work that they had been doing in Somalia through peacebuilding and some of the tools and things that were being developed, and also their kind of struggle and interest in wanting to kind of have more of the trauma lens and more of the trauma-informed piece. So she talked about that, and I talked to her more about the work that we had been kind of doing and developing at Global Trauma Project, which was really focused on providing capacity building type of support, so not direct service, but really looking at how do we provide more kind of training, support, consultation for providers, for local providers who are actually doing this work on the ground. And the main kind of framework that we have been using for this and kind of is continuously being kind of developed for this is called the TICE framework, which stands for Trauma-Informed Community Empowerment. What's up here is a little bit cut off because you can see it a bit better, and then I'll show you the bigger kind of picture next. But basically, I think this framework has been kind of being developed over the last 6 years or so through work in collaboration with the Trauma Center at JRI in Boston in the US, where I'm originally from. And then with a lot of input through a lot of organizations, both throughout the United States and throughout East Africa. And so one of the things that we were really looking at with this framework is kind of having the belief that in pretty much every area and every country and community, there are already people that are doing the healing work. There's already people and providers and leaders that are working in a healing capacity, and that oftentimes and sometimes we are working somewhat in isolation without the right kind of resources or support. And so, I think plays into the wounded healer and the wounded leader, and just to the level of support that we continue to need, even if we're providing leadership and support and therapeutic support or whatever it might be to people in our communities. The framework that I'll just briefly be able to talk about is really one that's based on core concepts. So basically the thought is not that providers just need to have kind of some specific tools to be able to use, because I think for many of us in our experience, we had seen this kind of a number of times where people kind of go to a training, are trained in whatever it might be, depending on whoever's kind of been flown in to provide the training, and then this is now the tool that we have. So now we know how to do EMDR, or now we know CBT skills, or whatever it is. But looking at what are the foundational things that impact us as humans when we've experienced trauma or ongoing significant stress. And so really looking at these kind of 5 main components as being some very kind of core things that affect humans across the board. when we go through these very difficult kinds of experiences. So one being the realm of safety. So our sense of safety becoming affected in a number of different ways. Our physical safety, our emotional and psychological safety, both internal safety as well as external safety in our environment. Looking at the area of regulation, so talking about our emotional and our physiological regulation, how that becomes too intense or too shut down when our survival brain gets activated and we go into the survival responses, but how that kind of plays out over time. And we can end up living in that mode of kind of a hyper-aroused or a hypo-aroused kind of state, and how to balance that. The area of connection, so our area of relationships and how our relationships, both with ourselves as well as with other people, within our families, within our communities and our greater society become affected. Looking at the area of identity, so how it was talked about quite a bit already this morning in terms of how we see ourselves, the areas of shame, of guilt, of blame, of where do I belong, and then finally the area around empowerment. So this area kind of being affected in terms of my sense of competency. Do I feel as though I can actually do something, that I have a sense of control and power? Do I have choices? And am I able to do something to help myself and my family and our situation? So really looking at these are some of the kind of fundamental areas that become impacted. And so if we're working on trauma healing, we're kind of saying these are the core areas that we need to look at. Thanks. Okay, so basically we're looking at doing this by initially kind of working with providers on this kind of foundational training, where people kind of go more into kind of the introduction to trauma and compounded stress, how stress can affect us. We go through these components more in depth, and then also do a self-healing workshop that Paul is also going to talk more about, but where providers are able to really have time for themselves to look at our own woundedness. Just a second. So then the final part is that after that, then depending on the need and the community and the setting, that communities are able to kind of identify and define, these are our needs, these are the particular populations that we're working with or issues that we're seeing, and so we need specific tools to help us address some of these things. Some of these tools we may already have, some we may not have, some may exist someplace else, some may need to be developed. And so that's what we're kind of, constantly in process with. And what my fellow colleagues are going to talk a little bit more about, because we're using this TICE framework along now with initially one specific tool that they'll talk more about just now, this Kuera Nabata or Morning Star tool. And I guess the final thing is just really looking at the focus, first and foremost in all of this work, as being internal with ourselves first, before we can actually bring this out and work within our communities. So really looking at these elements within ourselves as support providers or leaders in our communities before we're able to continue with others.
Welcome. What does Morning Star mean? More than 50 years, conflict finally independent. How is a country riddled by war coping? Where are the opportunities to learn from other contexts? Morning Star is basically the result of a learning event. In September last year, colleagues from Somalia, Kenya, came together to share their experiences about conflicts and how conflicts has been resolved in their countries. Both political, social, economic, and intercommunal violence that has taken place. We viewed their experiences with what has gone wrong in our country. Sudan has been at war by itself when it was yet one country. And when South Sudan got independence, basically a few months or few years, again, another conflict erupted. Why was this happening? There have been a lot of peace building, reconciliation meetings. All experts of peace building, reconciliations, and trauma healing, psychological support experts, all were there over all these years. From the first war in 1970s, up to 1980s, up to the CPA, up to independence. Finally, the yoke was broken in December when the political party, the SPLM, started fighting among themselves. Why? Because all the traumatic events along the years, the 50 years was not that big. People had made peace, but the following day, they broke it. So, when we got the experience from our neighbors, together, it became clear, because of the different cultures, we decided to call ourselves Morning Star. Who are we? We intend to be a network of self, community, and national trauma healing, reconciliation, peace building, and an inclusive empowerment body. We want to have a healthy vision and reconciliation for individuals and communities with a new life, hope, and justice for all the people of South Sudan. Our goal is to create and opportunities for healing for individuals and the people of South Sudan so that they can reconcile among themselves. How are we going to do this? We are going to do this we are going to do it by training, actually, resource facilitators from the different nations. From the different tribes, communities. And why Morning Star? Because of these decades of war, which we have already stated. So that the different communities will actually impart in themselves and the communities the effect of trauma and begin to journey and dialogue among communities what has gone wrong with them and the need to piece together what they can do together. The tools we are going to use are the tools for self-healing, which is being spearheaded by Paul, who is taking the communities through self-healing. And then we are going to do it through the Village Star. The Village Star is developed into the 9 languages. The one of Dinka and English languages are already over. And the rest of our community languages are being developed. So this is how we are going to work with. Currently we have a board of directors, we have a staff team, and we have solicited 16 resource facilitators, which we are going to train them into this material so that they go out and implement what they've learned. What are the challenges? The challenges for this program is, as we have heard before from the different speakers, the challenges of ownership, owner's control vis-a-vis the local ownership of the program. Our communities actually know what the trauma is and how to go about it, and what psychosocial supports are in our African context along the different cultures. 2, Western understanding of what healing needs to take place. All about timeliness, evidence-based, not interconnectedness, trauma, peace building, reconciliation, and forgiveness. The situation is compounded by what they want through simple solutions, quick results, and numbers of how many workshops people have, and how many people they've reached, how many areas they've covered. But they're not really journeying through personal issues and dealing with what has happened to the individuals that can cause re-event of the situation one has gone through. Basically, this is what I have. Southern Sudanese artists were drawn from 4 of them.
5.
From 5. They have gone through all the traumatic events that has overtaken the country. There are 155 drawings here. We have them in soft copies. Each community, each person, each sections of communities, social leaders, political, parliamentarians, all have something for them, including ourselves. All. Our communities are not highly educated, so through these pictures, when these materials, how the trauma event takes place, is shown to them under trees, they identify what has happened to them through these pictures. And then the facilitators take these pictures at home and sit under trees or families. They look at what has happened, like this violence in the home. They can begin to identify, the women can begin to identify and talk about it. They begin to identify and journey through. All sections of life in the communities are here. This is already translated in Dinka language. We have the one in English here. These are the lesson plans, the handbook for the facilitators. And I refuse to be a victim. I'm a resource for peace. These are the training manual for the resource facilitators. They will go through how they use these features. And the lesson plan. The communities will look at what has taken place through these postcards. And people will begin to dialogue and journey other than condemning people of this and that to be this. And later on, they will begin to begin to talk. And when discussions begin, confidence building comes, and then people will be drawn together. What can we do together? Then they will begin to draw the communities together and find solutions to them. Other than having theories, it's good to have theories at the universities and in such.
Keep them in universities.
Whatever I was saying here, in my education, in my home, in my village, in my district, in my country. Because otherwise it would be meaningless for me to be here. And so, this is practically what we intend to do and how the community will begin to do. The government can organize peace meetings with a lot of colors. Presidents can fly here. Political parties can come and do meetings in the Johannesburg. But when they go back, the fighting doesn't stop. Take from me. Until each one journeys through what has happened to him and how he can overcome it together. With this neighbor, with this brother, with this wife.
I'll just add one thing about the paintings. They're not just of kind of aggression and victimhood, they're also of the daily life of resiliency. And there's some beautiful paintings of the resiliency, and it's nothing that isn't new. It's something that's already there, and it's a part of what will heal the nation. And so we have the South Sudanese version. Somehow we didn't bring the Somali version, but come and look at them and enjoy looking at them.
Good afternoon, everyone. I enjoyed the discussions about leaders, because that's what I do. When you're a hammer, they say don't presume that everybody is a nail. And it's the same in trauma. We presume every country at war, everybody's traumatized. We heard earlier that few are traumatized. Well, I'm sorry to say, in South Sudan, the vast majority are traumatized. There is no doubt, research has been done, and over the last 15 years, this is what I do every day. We'll get statistics later. The vast majority, I believe, are traumatized. If traumas are about not coping, not managing, then for sure, our people, they are traumatized. Leaders. We've been talking about trauma. Everybody's spoken about trauma. But who are we talking about? What's the name of that person who's traumatized? Well, I'll tell you one person who's traumatized or who was traumatized. It was me. In 1999, I was diagnosed as having severe post-traumatic stress disorder. Why? I was running a refugee camp of 300,000 people. I often buried children with my own arms, even my hands. I had been arrested over a dozen times and locked up in prison. And I'd been kidnapped and at various times even shot at. Even once Ferdinand and myself, Ferdinand's just behind there, we were on a plane flying into Nuba Mountains in 2004. The government forces were attacking Nuba Mountains and Ferdinand nudges me and says, by the way, they're fighting when we arrive at the airport, which is an airstrip, follow me, we'll run. And with a bit of luck, we might make it. Now, if I die, please tell my wife how much I love her. And I'm going, oh my God. So, we've been through a lot of war, a lot of fighting, a lot of killing. So I dedicated my life after getting sorted out. Because if you don't deal with your trauma will deal with you. If you don't manage it, it will manage you. If you don't control it, it will control you. Sometimes it's a case of managing your thought process. It's managing your hypothalamus. Your hypothalamus is the one that's sending the cortisols and adrenals into your system that does make you fight or flight. Learn to deal with them. Learn to control them. Learn to manage them. Because if you don't, you end up in trouble like me. In 1999, I was homicidal and suicidal. I'm a member of the SPLM, but I wanted Sudan People Liberation Movement. But I wanted to be a member of the Sudan People Liberation Army. I spent 20 years of my life as a priest. And I was brought up in Scotland, known as a Republican, the Irish Republican Army. So being a Republican, a rebel, fighting for liberation of people was normal for me. But I realized there was one person after I got helped who really needed to be healed. I wanted to spend my life healing leaders. And the one leader that needed the most help was me, Paul Boyle. And so in the year 2000, I founded a trauma healing program called Healing the Healers, a new hope for Sudan. Because I realized, you know, you can heal 2 million South Sudanese, but if you don't heal the top 200 at the top, you're not doing much at all. So this is why I decided to start a program with the Catholic priests, because I was a Catholic priest. And in order to heal them, we brought them out of South Sudan, North Sudan, and we brought them to Nairobi, where I live. And we put them through therapy for 1 year. I'll give you a statistic. 40% of the Catholic priests in Sudan have a mental illness. If our religious leaders are mentally ill, what about the political ones? I don't think the Catholics are any more mental than any other religion. But we have worked on them. We have a cardinal in Khartoum. He says, we Catholic bishops have survived 25 years of war. we don't know how to survive the peace. And this is why we have problems in Africa, because of worrying factions. We talk about peace and reconciliation. They will never find peace and reconciliation until they find the ability to forgive and get healed. And so, since 2004, I moved on from healing the healers to healing the leaders. And I set up a program to heal the political leaders with Dr. Garang. Do you know how long it took us to get it off the ground? 10 years. Do you know when it first happened? 3 weeks ago.
Well done.
2 months ago, I was invited as a guest lecturer to we have a military academy in Juba. And I presented, and I did not talk about leadership. I know our last presenter said, we try to disguise trauma healing through leadership. Don't. I gave a presentation to 30 army generals. The Inspector Police General was there. The Under-Secretary of the Ministry of Defense was there. The big shots of the military are there. By the way, all of these men and women are studying for a master's degree. I was the guest lecturer. And I opened my lecture like this. Generals, our soldiers have committed atrocities. Our soldiers have committed acts of genocide. And I looked out, and you know what they did? They stood up and they applauded. They said, yes, we are sick. We are traumatized. We need help. So the military academy made an offer to the generals. There's 30 on the course right now. They said, we want to bring Paul Boyle for a trauma healing workshop, trauma healing and awareness workshop. If you want to come, sign up. The Minister of Defense paid for my fee, for my ticket, for my accommodation, but each general was told, if you want to come, you'll pay for your own accommodation and your own food. We didn't want to make it easy. Do you know how many came? 28, plus 75 bodyguards. The Inspector Police General brought 35. We had 75 bodyguards outside my class. For 5 days, these generals, 27 men and 1 woman, she's also an army officer, she's now a Minister of State, they learned, they cried, they danced, they listened, they shared their brokenness. And I was quite shocked on day 4. They call me Abuna. Abuna means father. They says, Abuna, tomorrow we're bringing our national television station. We need to tell the nation that we military generals are the most traumatized in the country. And because we're the most traumatized, we need to make our people trauma-wised. We have learned, we must teach. We are broken, we feel healed. We have changed, we need to transform our people as opposed to transfer our pain. So what the generals did was, by the way, last Sunday they were on television. You should have heard them. I am the most broken. My name is General what? But I've changed. I've been healed. We must heal the nation. From the president, they even mentioned the president's name. I tell you, the general said, our president is traumatized. And he needs help. This is his generals. Let him dare criticize the generals. So, 5 of them, 5 of the most senior generals gave a presentation on television about their healing, transformation, change. It's just the beginning, by the way. This is not the end, this is the beginning. The last day was a Sunday. By the way, this was Saturday. It was Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, leaving Sunday. So as far as I was concerned, I was done Saturday evening. The general said, no, please, we want to continue on Sunday. I said, but, you know, it's your rest day, it's your last day before work. I said, we want to continue on Sunday. So on the Sunday morning, I did bioenergetics. If you know bioenergetics, like the gazelle shakes out the trauma. And then afterwards, the general said, we want to meet, sit down, and discuss strategy to heal the nation. and I'm going to share with what they said. Number one, 5 of the generals said, no, the group said, we want to meet the Minister of Defense tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. We'll send the 5 most senior generals. And they did it. And they called me afterwards, it was quite funny. The 5 generals were sitting in the minister's office, and the minister was shouting and cursing at people, and the 5 generals were laughing their heads off. And he says, why are you laughing at me? They said, you are traumatized. You need to go through Paul's workshop. And the minister says, I'm traumatized, and they were sharing what they learned. Can I tell you what happened 3 hours later? The minister went with the 5 generals to sit with the president, and they shared what they learned in my class. Strategy number 1. Strategy number 2, starting from next week, the 13th, I'm giving a 2-hour presentation at military headquarters in Juba, a place called Bilfam. And I'm going to address the minister, as well as the chief of staff, and all of those who did not attend my workshops. By the way, in Bilfam is all the top generals in the country. So I'm going to give a 2-hour presentation. And then on the 20th, inshallah, I will give a 5-day workshop for them. In June, I'm going to give a 5-day workshop for all the military medical personnel. Agreed, signed up, ready to go. That's strategy number 1 from the military. Sorry, the military went all senior generals. We're not talking about soldiers here. This work here, these resource facilitators we're training from next week, they will work with the soldiers. I will work with the generals. And hopefully in the future, the people I train will also work with me in the generals. The second strategy is the police commissioner. The police commissioner is a very big shot. And his plan is this: all senior police officers will go through the trauma healing workshop. But he also said, and he's already done it, he went to the Ministry of Communication. They want to serialize the workshop that I'm conducting on television for 15 weeks, 1 hour each week, because they want to sensitize the nation to the effects of stress and trauma in their lives. You see, the normal becomes abnormal, and the abnormal becomes normal. People in South Sudan think trauma is normal. Violence is normal. They think that alcoholism is normal. It is not normal. Violence is not normal or acceptable. And so already in June, I'm going to be working with the senior police officers. A third strategy, and I'm going to end in a few minutes, is the Minister of State also went to meet the governor of Juba, which is the most senior state in the country because of its proximity. She went to meet the governor with 3 other generals. You see, the generals are powerful, so what the generals want people to do. And by the way, it's very interesting in South Africa, 1.5% is for the military and your the GOP or whatever you call it. Do you know what it is in South Sudan? Over 40% goes to the military. 40%. So, the Minister of State wants us to train all the ministers in government. The last section I want to talk about is IGAD. For the last year or so, IGAD has been trying to find a political solution to the problem in South Sudan. And by the way, trauma is stored in the memory. When you look at the Dinkas, what happened in December 2013, what triggered their fight response? 1991. The memory of the massacre in 1991. In 10 years' time, if the Nuers are not healed, what will trigger them is the memory of December 2013. If we don't heal these people, we're in trouble. For the last year or more, IGAD has tried every political solution up their sleeve to resolve the stalemate between the rebel leaders and the government, the SPLM and the SPLM-IO, which means in opposition. They have found no solution. We have good news. Fidi, Tim, Angi, myself and IGAD have formed a team. And we presented a proposal to USAID. Our plan is to go in together and we're going to do a 7-day workshop. I will probably do 5 of the days. Our brothers and sisters in IGI will do 2 of the days. And we're going to start with the government delegates for 7 days, trauma healing, peace building, forgiveness, reconciliation. After that, we want to do 7 days with the rebel leaders. And we will do the same process. And there's a third workshop. The third one is we're going to bring them together, probably to Djibouti. And we want to help them, because you cannot find peace unless you are at peace. You cannot find resolution when you're at conflict. You cannot change the world when you cannot change yourself. You cannot put people up when you already feel down. Many of our leaders, they don't sleep at night. They're drunkards. They're angry, they're aggressive, they're violent, they're abusive, they're homicidal, suicidal, genocidal, and we give them a political solution. And then you get countries, forgive me if you're from United States, the US government will say, if you don't get a peace deal, we're going to put sanctions, and we're going to do this, we're going to do that. Traumatized people laugh their heads off. Because the more you insult them, the more they'll hurt others. The more you abuse them, the more they'll abuse others. The more you put them down, the more they'll put others down. So we're in the situation now where the government is buying into trauma healing. We ask you to join us. You may need us to join you. United we stand, divided we fall.
Osman. Up here too. So this is Osman Moallim. I didn't introduce him before, I skipped him. He's the Executive Director of the Somali Youth Development Network. A very long-term friend and somebody who's been working for many years on this. I remember when we first started to, almost as a fluke, on the Somali-Kenya border, as Al-Shabaab had actually just taken over the Somali area. I don't know. Do we want that? We need that.
Just stay shouting in the house.
They'll scoot over. Just as we had started, just almost as a fluke, to do kind of community level trauma healing programming, because the Kenya government said no peace building, that's forbidden, that's for us to do. We kind of went in and did trauma healing, and Osman was always somebody from Mogadishu who was watching what the team on the ground was actually doing and how they were doing. And he said to me about 8 years ago, Angi, that's what we need to do in Somalia. I don't know how we're going to do it, we have to find a way to do it. Today we've started, and I think he's going to tell us more about what's going on.
Thank you, Angi. Good afternoon. Talking about this trauma, actually, I think it was 2007 when I met a group of Somali who work in the border area and have some basic training of trauma healing and do peace building in the border area. And that's the time I really realized that these things, as Paul mentioned it, we all need, as a Somali, from the president to the civil servants and the community, this trauma healing, to heal in the past. And just briefing a little bit about Somalia, we had since our independence, we had 3 different situations. From 1960, that's the time we got independent, up to 1969, there was a civilian government who ran the government, the country. And a lot of people feel that that civilian government was ruling the country, or running the country, injustice, and they grieve that administration. But the military of Somalia make coup and get the power just to take advantage of what the community of Somali society feel. But the military ruled Somalia almost 20 years, and they did actually worse than the civilian government. So that was the second situation. The third situation is this 25 years without people are running without government in the country. And a lot of criminal commitment, a lot of trauma events, a lot of violence happened in these 20 years. But when you look at these three situations, it links one another to the other. And sometimes, actually, some people, when they talk about their trauma, they talk about during the military regime. Some of them, they talk about during civilian government, and some of them talk about the civil war. But these three situations, and people who have been through all these three situations and got trauma, that's how we come up this program to deal three different societies who have been same society but very different situations that have been through and get trauma. And the Qur'an Abadda, as you see, is a tree of peace in English. Qur'an Abadda is a Somali, a catch here. And we got this actually, this name because of people to feel ownership. Whenever we solve our situation, whenever we deal our conflict, we go to under tree. And that's how our culture to deal the conflict and all the dispute in our dispute. So we want people or our society to feel ownership and use their own way when they are dealing with trauma. So the word of trauma, actually, people understand. We know we have a name that in the Somali, but people difficult to identify how to know you are traumatized and how to manage that trauma. So that's the area that we were focusing. The other issue was that most of the international community and those helping Somali stability, they focus on only security. No one talk about peace. And peace and security cannot maintain without peace. And when it comes to the peace, actually we did some conflict analysis and mapping, and that's what we found, that the social conflict is bigger than the political conflict. And we had almost 20 reconciliation conferences in Somalia in the past. All of them, they were dealing with political reconciliation. No one talked about social reconciliation. Actually, that's how we come up with this Qur'an Nawada and the piece of tree to deal with social reconciliation in our society. So the aim of the Qur'an Nawada is actually to address the need of social reconciliation and how to break the cycle of violence. It also deals how to make forgiveness among Somali society in the past. Actually, when I look at Somali society, everyone believes that he or she is the most victim of society, but no one talks about the other one. And that's how actually we try to help people come together and talk and share their painful in the past, their history. And one of the actually these artists that we use is giving the people these cards and get their story. So each one can take one of the pictures that he has experienced or she has experienced and start talking about that story. And that's how actually people come up their story. So when people listen to one another, then it will be easy for them to come to compromise, because when they feel that they are not alone. You feel you are not alone, and what happened to you also happened to others. And that's how actually it works. So then we try to start this Qur'an Nawada in Somalia as a pilot project, one of the most hottest region area in Somalia, with central region, very dynamic in conflict, almost 7, 8 different clans are living in that region, and each one has fighting the other one. So that's where we actually choose to start as a pilot project, Qur'an Nawada. And the way it works, this Qur'an Nawada is 12 weeks course, And each week, one day, for 2 hours, they will have each group. So, and the reason we actually make it 12 weeks, once a week, is that people, we want to, whatever they learn this today, then before they reach the next week, they will reflect in their environment, because this is what happened every time in their life. So, and that's actually how they come up an interest of this and trauma healing, to understand more about and to identify that they are very traumatized. So this 12 weeks course, they attended each group, and each group consists of 15 people who attended the session for 12 weeks and learned this course of Quran Abad. And that Quran Abad tells us how to break the cycle of violence, how to make forgiveness, how to tell the truth, justice, all that issues of dealing with trauma, they learn from that. And that region, when we started in 6 districts, actually we were targeting 1,350 people with different societies. Women group, youth group, elders, religion group, private sector, IDPs, police. There were different groups that consist of 1,350. Each district, almost 3 of them, they were actually 240, and the other one was 210, the other 3. So after we finished this, before we started this training, we realized that we need to prove. We feel that people need to heal in the pain, but how to prove that? So we did baseline study. The baseline study we have taken and asked almost 1,600 people questionnaires related to the trauma and the forgiveness and justice. This is the material of the QN. So this is the database that we have taken in Belgrade region, which is one of the regions in Somalia, to find out how the people feel that the forgiveness and justice. So the willingness of forgiveness by the extent of trauma, actually almost 91 people actually, 91 of the clients want to forgive the percentage. And others believe is actually 12.7 believe that people to account those who have committed crimes, and others, they don't know actually what to say. But when you look at actually in general, that you can feel the forgiveness is very important. One of the case actually study that we learned is that we give this Quran about some young people who defected from Al-Shabaab. I think you know more about Al-Shabaab. There are some extremist people. And they defected Al-Shabaab. Now they are in a camp, and the government actually recognized them. They are low-risk people, because it was brainwashed when they joined Al-Shabaab. So we trained them. Before we trained them, we asked them questions about their future. So one young man actually told me that he wanted to join to the army. And when I asked him why you want to join to the army, he said, that's the only place I can save my life. Because I cannot go back to my community, because they don't believe that I defected from Al-Shabaab. And Al-Shabaab themselves, they hunted me. So if I join to the army, then I can get a gun to defend myself. That's the only option I have. But after the training, after he attended the training, then we asked the same questions, that how it makes the impact of this Quran about that. And then he said, no, I don't want to join the army. I said, so what do you want to do? And he said, no, I have a chance to ask people, the community, forgiveness. I didn't know that before. So now I know that if I ask forgiveness, they may forgive me. So that's what I need to actually, because even if I have a gun, I still possibly commit a crime. So, and now he said, I don't want to join the army. I am ready to forgive, to ask forgiveness to the community. Then we organized an event that for him to ask forgiveness through facilitated by traditional dispute resolution committee in that town. So what this small boy feels, actually, we realize that most of the Somali politicians are feel same like that. A lot of politicians are trying to keep this situation the way it is because they have fear. If changes happen, they may lose influence, or they may lose money, or they may lose power, or they may go to the court. So same what the small boy has feeling, they have feeling everyone who committed in the past crime. So they are against the change in Somalia. So they like to keep actually a situation the way it is, because as long as they have influence, they feel that they are secure, their safety. So, and that's actually needed when it's coming to the leaders, they need such of these things to understand for them that there's another way they can secure their life. Either to ask forgiveness to the community or go to the truth and justice. So that's how actually, but for them to understand, it's big time, and that's how actually we need to do that things. And the trust, completely, we lost trust in terms of what we have got fighting in the past conflict, and also the system that been existed in the past. Actually, people lost trust, and a lot of things happened because of lack of trust. And when you look at we did some of the research about how people elected the leaders. Actually, we elected our leader because of the hate we have the previous one, not what he offered to do. So, and that's actually makes people, we are very traumatized and angry. That's why actually our leaders always not to elected by what they are offered to do to the community or society, but the hate that we have the previous one, we elected the new one. Similar of that, the trauma, when it comes to trauma, not only affected Somalis in people living in Somalia, but also Somali in diaspora. A lot of Somali diaspora, they went to trauma when they left Somalia. Anger, and still they are living in Western countries and abroad countries physically, but their mentally is in Somalia still. And that it affects also the families living there, and also it breaks down a lot of family structure and disconnected the parents and the kids. And when I look at most of the young people who suicide themselves in Somalia, they come from Western countries. Not those young people who live in Somalia, who have a displaced and no future. Most of them, 99%, they come from Western countries, where they have life and opportunity. So a lot of people ask themselves, how can happen someone living in Western countries back to Somalia and commit suicide himself and kill people? That's one thing actually, real when we did preliminary research, that actually in March I was in the United States. I visited Minneapolis, which is a very big Somali community living, and I asked them that question. Actually, they realized that there is a lot of trauma that's going on, Somali families living there. Even some of them, they are not separate physically, but mentally they love each other. So they are together. When you look at them, you think that they like each other, but they love their mind. They don't have any communication. They don't have actually any relationship and collaboration. So actually, that's actually We are remaining for questions. So far actually, the time is so short, but I believe I covered what I want to say. And thank you very much for your listening.